I'm Professor Theodore Whitmore, a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience in the fields of psychology and personal development. Welcome to the Whitmore Way. Imagine this for a moment. You're sitting in a room, perhaps your bedroom, your office, or even a quiet cafe. The world outside is buzzing, but inside your mind is anything but calm. The screen in front of you, whether it's a blank page, an unfinished project, or a task you know you should tackle, stares back at you. Your hands are frozen, your mind racing. You think to yourself, what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if nobody cares what I have to say? Does that sound familiar? Now, let me tell you a story. As a young lecturer at the university, I remember sitting in my office late at night, preparing for my first big lecture. I had just been hired, fresh out of graduate school, full of excitement and doubt. I could hardly concentrate, my mind constantly whispering, what if I can't answer the students' questions? What if they think I don't know what I'm talking about? What if they realize I'm just pretending to know what I'm doing? That was my own battle with self-doubt. It's not something I talk about often, but I'm sure many of you can relate. Those same feelings of being not enough have crept into every part of my life at some point. But here's the thing. You're not alone. No one is immune to self-doubt. And, as I've learned over the years, it's not something we have to let control us. In fact, if we learn to understand it and face it head-on, self-doubt can actually become a stepping stone to our success. So let me ask you, have you ever had those moments when you felt like you were stuck? Not because you didn't have the ability, but because you just couldn't shake off the feeling that you weren't good enough? Or maybe you've convinced yourself that everyone else has it figured out, but you're still sitting there, unsure of your next step. Well, I've been there. And today, I'm going to share with you some thoughts and strategies on how to overcome that nagging voice of self-doubt that so often holds us back. But before we get into it, if you've ever experienced these feelings, I want to invite you to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. You're not alone in this, and I want to hear from you. And of course, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe so we can keep this conversation going. Let's take a step back and really explore what self-doubt is. We all know what it feels like: the hesitation, the second-guessing, the constant questioning of our abilities. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself, why do I feel this way? Why does this voice in our head always seem to creep in, especially when we're about to take a leap forward? The truth is, self-doubt isn't some mysterious force outside of us. It's something deeply embedded in our nature. We're social creatures, after all, constantly influenced by the opinions of others. Self-doubt is often a result of fear: fear of judgment, fear of rejection, and, most of all, fear of failure. Now, I'm not just talking about failing in the traditional sense, failing a test or missing a deadline. I'm talking about the kind of failure that feels deeply personal, the kind of failure that makes us believe, I'm just not good enough. And here's the kicker: that feeling isn't just restricted to those who are struggling or unsure. Even those who appear confident, successful people wrestle with it. I'll let you in on a little secret. When I first started teaching, I had a serious case of what's called imposter syndrome. It's this feeling that no matter how much I knew, no matter how many years I'd spent studying, it wasn't enough. I was convinced that the students were going to figure me out. They were going to see through the facade and realize that I didn't belong in the classroom. That feeling, it almost stopped me from pursuing my passion. But here's the thing. I pushed through, and over time, I realized something important. Self-doubt doesn't disappear, but it can be managed. It can even become a source of strength if we allow it to be. Think of it like this. Self-doubt is like a shadow that follows you. It's there, yes, but it's only as big or small as you allow it to be. You see, self-doubt often arises when we feel unprepared or unsure of ourselves. It stems from the belief that we aren't capable of succeeding, but let me tell you, everyone, from top athletes to famous writers, has those moments of doubt. The difference is how they handle it. Now, you might be wondering, Professor Whitmore, that all sounds well and good, but why does self-doubt seem to dominate my thoughts so much? Well, let's break it down a bit further. You see, the nature of self-doubt is deeply rooted in our past experiences. If you think about it, most of us start to feel inadequate when we're younger. Perhaps you've been told you're not good enough, or maybe you've faced criticism that left you questioning your worth. These experiences often start young, maybe in school or at home, and they tend to stick with us longer than we realize. Our minds are naturally wired to seek approval, and when we feel like we're not meeting expectations, it stirs up these feelings of insecurity. And when you add external pressures, whether it's social media, the competitive workplace, or even family expectations, those feelings of doubt become even stronger. This all leads to what I call the loop of negativity. But here's the good news. Recognizing where self-doubt comes from is the first step in taking back control. Once we understand it, we can start to challenge it. Before we continue, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever experienced that voice of doubt in your head, whether it's before a job interview, a presentation, or simply trying something new? If you have, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Let's have a conversation about how we all experience this and how we can help each other move past it. And by the way, if you're finding this discussion helpful so far, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more insights like this. It really helps the channel grow and reach others who need a little extra encouragement. All right, now that we understand a bit about where self-doubt comes from, let's talk about how it manifests. You see, self-doubt doesn't just stay in one place, it shows up in different ways. Sometimes it's that nagging feeling in your stomach before you take on something new. Other times, it might appear as procrastination as you convince yourself that you're just not ready yet. But no matter how it shows up, self-doubt can keep you stuck if you don't know how to face it head on. You see, self-doubt isn't just something that happens to us. It's often the result of a combination of factors, some of which we might not even be fully aware of. So, let's explore a few key reasons why self-doubt shows up in our lives and, more importantly, how we can start to understand and address them. First up, fear of judgment and rejection. How many times have you held back from doing something, whether it's speaking up in a meeting, posting something online, or even asking for a raise, because you were terrified of how others would respond? You might have thought, what if they think I'm not qualified? Or what if they laugh at my ideas? You see, we are social creatures, and we are hardwired to seek acceptance from others. It's built into us from an evolutionary standpoint. But in today's world, that drive to be accepted can often lead to unnecessary self-doubt. We start to question our worth, our ideas, and our potential based on how we think others will perceive us. It's exhausting, isn't it? You could be completely capable of succeeding in something, but if you're focused on avoiding judgment, you might talk yourself out of trying at all. But here's the secret. You will never be able to please everyone, and you don't need to. What really matters is being true to yourself and trusting that the people who truly matter will see the value in what you bring. Now let's talk about another big one, comparison. In today's world, where social media gives us a constant stream of other people's successes, it's all too easy to start measuring our own lives against theirs. You might scroll through your feed, and there's your colleague from university who's just landed their dream job. Or maybe it's that influencer who seems to have it all together, posting glamorous photos every day. And as you watch from the sidelines, you begin to wonder, why isn't my life like that? What's wrong with me? The truth is, what you're seeing online is a carefully curated snapshot of someone's life. It doesn't tell you about their struggles, their failures, or the nights they lay awake doubting themselves, just like you. The truth is, comparison is a killer when it comes to self-doubt. It convinces us that everyone else is ahead, that everyone else is better, and that somehow we're falling behind. But here's what I've learned over the years. Your journey is yours. The only comparison that matters is the one between you and the person you were yesterday. And if you're taking small steps forward, you're already ahead of where you were before. Don't let someone else's timeline dictate your worth. And now we come to something that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the imposter syndrome. Ah, the infamous imposter syndrome, the feeling that you're not deserving of your achievements, that you're simply faking it, and that one day everyone will figure you out. It's a sneaky little monster, isn't it? It hides behind every achievement, whispering, "You don't belong here." But here's the truth. Imposter syndrome affects even the most successful, accomplished individuals. From famous CEOs to world-renowned scientists, there isn't a single person who hasn't at some point felt like an imposter in their own life. And if I'm being completely honest, I still feel it sometimes too. When I was a young professor, every lecture I gave was shadowed by the fear that my students might realize I was just pretending to know it all, and I was far from alone. Many colleagues shared similar fears. The key here is realizing that imposter syndrome is not an indicator of your ability or your worth. It's simply a byproduct of the human mind trying to protect you from perceived failure. And, more often than not, it's just not true. It's a mindset, not a reality. Finally, we arrive at a concept that ties all of this together: perfectionism. You see, perfectionism and self-doubt are two sides of the same coin. Perfectionism is often driven by the desire to avoid criticism or failure at all costs. It convinces you that if something isn't done perfectly, it's not worth doing at all. So, you hold back. You procrastinate. You avoid taking action because you're terrified of not being flawless. And of course, when you don't meet your impossibly high standards, it feeds your self-doubt. But here's the thing: perfectionism is a myth. There is no such thing as perfect. We are all human, and humans make mistakes, and often those mistakes are where the greatest learning occurs. Letting go of the need to be perfect is one of the most liberating things you can do for your mental health and your personal growth. So, what does this all mean for you? Well, it means that self-doubt is not an enemy, but a signal. It's a signal that we care, that we want to do well, to succeed. And while it might feel uncomfortable, self-doubt doesn't have to define who we are or what we're capable of. It's something we can manage, challenge, and ultimately overcome. And before we move on, I want to hear from you. Have you experienced these feelings of fear of judgment, comparison, imposter syndrome, or perfectionism? How do they show up in your life? Let's have a conversation in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this discussion, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with anyone you think might need a little reminder that they're not alone. Let's get to the heart of the matter. How do we overcome self-doubt? How do we face this silent but persistent enemy, and more importantly, move forward despite it? Let me tell you, this part is crucial because overcoming self-doubt is not about simply wishing it away. It's about taking deliberate action and developing a mindset that supports your growth, not one that keeps you paralyzed in fear. First things first, let's talk about the power of taking small steps. If there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's this: action is the antidote to doubt. When you feel stuck, like you can't move forward because of those negative voices in your head, the easiest thing to do is to take a small, manageable step. It doesn't need to be a big leap. It can be as simple as writing a paragraph, making one phone call, or sending one email. It's about building momentum. You see, when you're unsure of yourself, the best way to fight that uncertainty is by doing something, anything. It's about proving to yourself that you're capable, even if it's just one small win at a time. And let me tell you, every small victory chips away at the foundation of doubt. Each time you take action, you reinforce the idea that you can do it. I remember when I was a young professor, there were days I was paralyzed by self-doubt before going into class. I was terrified I'd be caught off guard by a question, or worse, that I'd make a mistake in front of my students. But instead of giving in to that fear, I started doing something simple. I began preparing one small part of my lecture each day, rather than trying to do it all at once. That simple act made a huge difference. It gave me the confidence I needed to step into the classroom and deliver my lessons without constantly second-guessing myself. So, if you're sitting there thinking, how can I move past this self-doubt? Start small. Set one tiny goal today and get to work. It might not feel like much, but it's the beginning of something powerful. Do you know what's interesting? Our minds are so quick to focus on what could go wrong. It's part of that survival instinct we all have. But here's the thing. The mind doesn't have to be a fortress of fear. It can be a garden of opportunity too. So, instead of letting those self-doubts take root, let's reframe them. When you catch yourself thinking, I can't do this, or I'm not good enough, ask yourself this simple question. What evidence do I have to support this belief? The truth is, self-doubt is often based on nothing more than a feeling. It's a shadow that grows in the dark. But when you shine a light on it, it begins to fade. For example, when I doubted my abilities as a professor, I started keeping track of the positive feedback I received from my students. The thank you emails, the notes of appreciation, the successful lectures I was actually proud of. Those little pieces of evidence slowly but surely replaced the negative thoughts in my head. You can do the same thing. Keep a success journal. Every time you achieve something, even if it feels small, write it down. When that voice of doubt comes knocking, remind yourself of the evidence you've gathered. And let me tell you something else. The people you surround yourself with matter. You've heard the saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? Well, there's truth in that. When you have a strong support system, it makes all the difference. Now, I'm not just talking about people who tell you what you want to hear. I'm talking about people who believe in you, challenge you, and encourage you to see your potential. For me, those were my colleagues who, yes, also experienced self-doubt, but supported each other through it. I learned to open up and share my fears with them, and in doing so, they helped me see beyond my own limited perspective. Find your people. Surround yourself with those who lift you up, who will help you break free from those self-imposed limitations. Now, let's talk about a strategy that has been invaluable for me personally, the growth mindset. You see, the idea of the growth mindset comes from psychologist Carol Dweck, and it's the belief that your abilities and intelligence are not fixed. They can be developed over time. When I first started my teaching career, I thought I had to be perfect. Every lecture had to be flawless. Every paper had to be immaculate. But I soon realized that perfection wasn't the goal. Growth was. And that's where the magic happens. If you approach every challenge with the mindset that you can improve, that failure is simply a stepping stone. Then self-doubt no longer holds power over you. It becomes part of the process, not a roadblock. So I encourage you to embrace failure, embrace mistakes, and most importantly, embrace growth. The more you learn, the more confident you become. And you know what? You'll be amazed at how much your self-doubt fades when you realize that the road to success is paved with learning, not perfection. Finally, and this one is so important, be kind to yourself. You would never speak to your friends the way you sometimes speak to yourself, would you? So why do we allow ourselves to be our own worst critics? When you catch yourself in a cycle of negative thinking, stop. Take a deep breath and say something positive. It could be something as simple as, I'm doing my best, and that's enough. Self-compassion isn't about letting yourself off the hook. It's about accepting that you're human. You're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. It's part of being alive. So, there you have it. You don't have to let self-doubt control you. It's a part of your journey, yes, but it doesn't have to define your success. Take small steps, reframe your thoughts, surround yourself with supportive people, adopt a growth mindset, and most importantly, be kind to yourself. I know it's not easy, but I promise you, with time and effort, you'll see just how capable you truly are. And before we wrap up, I want to remind you, if this video has resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It's a way to show support for the channel and make sure that others who need this message can find it too. Remember, the path to overcoming self-doubt isn't a straight line. It's a journey, full of twists and turns. But with the right mindset and the right tools, you'll find your way to where you want to be. Keep pushing forward. You've got this. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care and keep believing in yourself.